Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's edition of ClueCon Weekly. Today with us is Irwin Lazar, President and Principal Analyst at Metrigy, and who is an expert about all things WebRTC, especially about market research and how to approach the market. And I thank you for joining us, Irwin, today. And I'd like you to do a quick introduction if you'd like.
Sure. Hi. As you mentioned, I'm President and Principal Analyst with a company called Metrigy. We're actually a pretty new company. We launched about on January 1st. We spun out of a company called Nemertes Research. I've been with Nemertes for about 14 years, leading our research in terms of unified communications and collaboration. We tend to focus on gathering data from end user organizations about how they're adopting and quantifying the emerging technologies. With specific to WebRTC, I was co-chair along with Brent Kelly of the WebRTC track at Enterprise Connect here in the United States for, it was about 6 years that we ran the event. In the mid part of the last decade, and I've been studying the technology and looking at enterprise adoption of CPaaS, WebRTC, unified communications, team collaboration, and other related technologies now for going on 15 years.
Oh, that sounds very interesting. So that's a very young company. So I wish you all the luck.
Thanks. It's been an interesting time to start a company.
Oh yeah, as always. Well, these are very interesting times, and that's why I'd like to ask you a few questions about the market, since you're probably one of the foremost experts in the area of communications market research. What we're looking at is we see more and more companies these days adopting unified communications or browser-based conferencing, any kind of tool. But there seems to be like two types of companies. One are just buying an off-the-shelf tool, hoping to either weather the storm or that things will eventually go away, or companies that seems to be embracing the change and making some of the changes actually permanent or at least very long-lived. Because there is some value in doing partial work from home, partial remote work, or even completely switching to that. So what do you think is a good approach for a company looking to move into the remote workspace for good?
Yeah, so we just published some data on what our company's thinking about in terms of go forward. And right now, it's about 87% of workers are at home. And we expect that that's going to continue. So the study results showed only about 12% of our participants, 475 companies in Western Europe and North America, have plans to bring people back full time. The rest are either going to allow people to work from home, or they're going to give them a choice. And that's impacting communications in a variety of different ways. It's certainly accelerating the use of cloud communication. So you mentioned, you kind of have this group that says, well, we're just going to go and buy something and use it. But we're also starting to see more of an effort to integrate communications into business workflows and achieve gains in productivity and even measurable cost savings and revenue enhancements by optimizing the processes, both internal and customer facing, by being able to integrate conferencing and calling and notifications and some sort of intelligence into communications.
That's very interesting. Yeah, that's a very high percentage of companies looking to do partial or complete. I think there's a couple very large names in there too. Like Microsoft has effectively made all Italian employees remote, as far as I know, indefinitely. And that's probably the same thing worldwide. And there's IBM's doing that too. There's a lot going on there.
Yeah.
So I think that brings a separate set of concerns with it. Like people are used to being in the office. Offices are a somewhat monitored environment with hardware and software. You know what's going in, you know what's going out. You can sort of know what people are doing. So how would you say a company should best approach those concerns? Like, I don't know what my employees are doing. They don't have good internet at home. Do we give them a computer? Do they use their own? What's the more common way to approach these problems, and do those solutions work?
Yeah, there's two kind of focus areas I think organizations need to look at to achieve success. The first is making sure people have the right set of applications. So what happened in the early days of the pandemic is everybody went out and got a video app. Okay, let's just grab whatever we can find. Maybe we have one available to us already. But what you ended up with was a large disparity in that different groups were using different applications. So we're starting to see some effort toward harmonizing that and providing a common interface. But I think having a video meeting app is first and foremost critical for supporting distributed workers. Secondly is the use of team collaboration capabilities. So we're seeing a lot of interest in the apps that allow people to have a centralized place to message, to access data from applications, and so on. We're also starting to see some other emerging applications becoming part of that toolbox. Things like project and task management tools, things like virtual whiteboard applications that allow people to ideate regardless of whether they're able to go in an office and use the whiteboard. So that's kind of phase one, is making sure you've got the right apps and that they're integrated as best as possible and easy to use and integrated into workflows, as I mentioned earlier. The second part is, from an IT perspective, rethinking that home office. It was always, I came out of IT before I got into research and analysis, and a little bit before work from home was real viable back in the days when you dialed in. But companies never really thought about home workers as something they had to worry about. It's always been best effort. So, if you're at home today and you're having Wi-Fi issues, or your kids are in school and they're using up all your bandwidth, I'm sorry, that's not something we worry about. And that has to change. And we found it really has changed over the last year. So IT shops are being more proactive in terms of making sure people have the right amount of bandwidth and that they can get visibility into the performance of those applications. So I can understand if someone at home using a video app is seeing poor quality performance. I'm going to help them figure out how to put Wi-Fi in their house properly so that they don't have dead spots, so that they can prioritize more important traffic over, say, the kids playing games or something like that. So we have seen an embrace of that home office over the last year by IT, and we've seen a strong correlation in companies that think that way that are more successful in terms of supporting homework than those that still kind of ignore the home office.
So proactive monitoring seems to be key here. Build tools into your application that will let your IT team know someone has consistently poor connectivity, so you can go help them or just suggest a solution or whatever. Because I feel like users will not always tell you, they're not used to working from home either, so they might not know. Which led me into another question. What do you think employees should be trained for? Aside from giving them the right tools, not many people are very used to remote work. I've been doing remote work for 15-ish year now, since I started working with the US, and it's second nature to me. But I have friends who tried and even backed down from it. I know people who started doing remote work for US companies and then went back to work for an Italian company and went to the office every day because that was wasn't working for them, and I understand that. So how would you train your users, given that there's no choice right now? What will you help them with?
Yeah, so you raised an interesting point in that we have seen the work from home it varies by a couple of things. It varies by region. It also so different parts of the world have different attitudes. So we found in our study that Asian companies, for example, are more likely to want to bring people back to the office than companies in North America and Europe. Just again, cultural differences. There's also differences in age. So younger workers tend to prefer to be in the office because they're building their careers. They want to be noticed. They want to feel like they're part of a team, where older workers at different stage of life who have kids and outside activities, they're happy to get that 2 hours back that they don't spend commuting and have the work hour flexibility and so on. So I think understanding that is critical, from a management perspective. Making sure that you are understanding that different people, just because you may like working from home doesn't mean everybody else does. And so I think the success is going to come from providing flexibility. I think learning how to manage people who work from home is a critical skill to have in today's world. I've been working from home now for 14 years, and it's a transition at first to feeling like, does anybody know what I'm doing? I'm sitting here by myself all day. I don't have any human interaction other than, sending some emails and texting, and maybe the occasional video call. So I think we've seen the companies that are implementing things like social activities have been more successful, that are implementing frequent check-ins, that are starting, one of the big areas we heard in our research is a lot of interest in analytics that would allow managers and HR teams to understand how engaged people are. Are they participating in conferences? Are they participating in messaging? A lot of that raises some really difficult privacy issues. We saw recently with Microsoft's productivity tool, where they were reporting on individual engagement, and then they had to pull that back because of concerns of Big Brother watching. So I think again, from a management standpoint, you have to be much more engaged with your workforce, and from somebody who's working from home for the first time, they have to take advantage of the tools that are out there, and hopefully they're in a culture where they can still ask for help, where there is still almost an open door policy to be able to make sure that you can get the support you need, so you're not feeling isolated being at home.
That's really an interesting take. Aside from running ClueCon Weekly and a few other things, I do a lot of work with customer success internally at SignalWire, and we do a lot of work with metrics. But those metrics are about the customers, not about the employees, right?
Mm-hmm.
It feels like you're flipping the script a little, and we should be using not particular at SignalWire, but I mean in the industry, we should be using the same tools to make sure our employees are being engaged the right way, the same we make sure our customers are being engaged the right way. So we check which pages of the dashboard people spend more time on. We check which pages of the dashboard people don't spend time on, which means either the feature is not being used or they're too complicated. That kind of stuff looks like it should be used for working with your workforce too, and I think that raises a very valid point.
Yeah.
One thing I know you touch on in your research is isolation caused by people not used to be remote. And I understand there's a very steep curve in there. It's a social curve, not even a learning curve. So when I started working remotely, I went from doing 5 or 6 days a week out of the house, because I was working for a large consultancy when I started out after graduating, to just not having anywhere to go. And it actually felt very weird, because I went from traveling 3 hours a day to not getting up and not really knowing, so I'm supposed to start working now, am I supposed to start working in an hour, where's everybody? And it was 15 years ago. So I understand that people going from today's environment to remote work all of a sudden because they're forced to, which is different than making a decision. And there was another team there about us having just to do it because you had to do it. So how would you solve the problem or help with the problem of isolation and people feeling like they're missing the office?
Yeah, again, I think it's taking advantage of the tools that you have. So taking advantage of video to have engagement, activities, setting the culture that one of the big challenges for people who work from home is they feel like they always have to work. It's always there. You can't just turn off the computer and leave at the end of the day like you used to be able to years ago. So setting guidelines around that. One of the things we did when we started Metrigy is we set up Fridays as a no call day, just to give people the flexibility to say, what, you're on probably more calls than you ever were. It's hard to get work done. You end up often with back to back video calls, so you're sitting staring at a screen all day long. So giving everybody the flexibility on Fridays to say, what, if you need to work, great. If you don't need to work, enjoy the day, as a way of giving people a little bit more flexibility and control over their schedules. We've instituted that you do not touch lunch breaks in the afternoon. So I'm starting to see companies looking at things like maybe we shorten meetings to 45 minutes, so there's a 15-minute gap between meetings. So again, you're not sitting staring at a video camera for 3 hours in a row, which can happen. So I think it's a process evolution. It's one where IT needs to work with HR shops in your organization to make sure that you're measuring employee happiness, employee satisfaction, and you're implementing new approaches that can potentially improve the mental wellness of employees by not locking them into such a rigid schedule.
So I have a question for you. Since you've seen so much market research, do you think collaboration tools such as Slack and always-on chat stuff, or even always-on video platforms, help with remote work, or do they hinder work at times? Because it feels like it's a word of distraction at some point.
Yeah, that's a good topic that has been debated quite a bit. My personal preference, ultimately, I think they help. I couldn't imagine going back to having to rely on email as a means of communication, especially, as a home worker. I think video is a massive improvement. We had started using video for all our calls about 2 years ago, just because we saw the benefit both internally and customer facing of being able to see people and have a higher form of communication. Now, that being said, I think you need to, like I said earlier, you need to set an expectation that, you know what, if you don't want to be on video for this call, that's okay. You know, if you want to go for a walk around the neighborhood or get on the treadmill while you're on a call, that's okay too. And then also teaching people how to use the ability that comes within apps like Slack to turn off notifications, to say block notifications when you're in a meeting, to set notifications so only when you're. I think one of the first things we did when we started our company was I had to teach people that, you know what, you can turn off notification every time someone posts a message in every channel, because that's on by default. You know, so you only want to really be notified for channels you care about or when you're mentioned. You know, so taking advantage of some of the snooze button and other tools are really critical.
I do that too. Yeah, it's been helpful. I think to add to that, the only thing I will add is that the only tool you will be missing in a setup like that is there needs to be a way to communicate what's really urgent. Because if everything is urgent, then nothing is. So as long as there's some process in place where you actually need an answer from engineering, you need support to look at something, all companies need is a way to make sure that happens. The other thing I would like to say is that as we get older, we're moving into the previous generation of the tech people, and the young guys don't look at email ever. That is actually a problem. Like, people that are 40 something don't understand why the 20 something engineers don't read email. Like, you send them an email and nothing happens. So people really grew up with a different look on things.
Yeah, I love it.
It's really different.
Yeah, I have to text my kids to tell them to go, look at an email.
Oh yeah, even WhatsApp is borderline something that people below 25 will not really use much. You have to tell them to look at it, or they won't look at the messages. It's interesting how communications move around. Well, to be honest, it took a while to get my father to actually use email, for example. So I think it's always a generational thing. Who knows what's going to be next? Telepathy, maybe.
Yeah, exactly.
That will be cool. Okay, so now we're going to what a company should do, and we probably have spun off at least a couple startups just by this little chat, because there's plenty of very interesting ideas that you suggested, and I really like a few of the approaches. So let's flip the script. Now we are starting out as a provider, as a company, as a startup, wanting to build a tool for unified communications, or tool for video conferencing, a specialized video conferencing tool. There's plenty of general purpose video conferencing tools, both free and with paid accounts, but there is also many companies building specialized tools. So what do you think are the success metrics that you should be looking for? Like, how do you grab the attention in a market that's so crowded?
Yeah, and you're right. It is a crowded market. I think there are a couple of things that we're seeing the vendors trying to differentiate themselves on. Certainly, quality and reliability is key. And here in the U.S. and already this month, we've seen two major internet outages. One yesterday that affected most of the Northeast of the United States, that took down many of the services that students rely on and people rely on. Earlier in the month, there was an outage of Slack, actually on the first Monday of the year. It set a bad precedent for the rest of the year. So I think reliability, performance, video quality is still table stakes. And I think the second area where we're seeing the vendors looking to differentiate is through the use of AI to do things like improve picture quality, compensate for poor lighting that you often have in a home environment, enable things like virtual backgrounds, block out background noise so that, if there's a dog barking or some other noise, the kids or whatever, that you can block that out. I think we talked earlier about, potentially things like sentiment analysis, so that you have that, as you mentioned, on the customer facing side today, but maybe you apply that to a conferencing communicate or a meeting type app, so that you can know, is the meeting going well, or are people tuning out, or the kind of tools that can give you more intelligence around a meeting. So I think intelligence, both in the meeting experience from an audio and video quality standpoint, as well as from the host standpoint, to understand how well is this meeting going? Is it productive? Have we gone too long? I think those are areas where I expect you'll see the meeting application vendors try and differentiate. And then lastly, I think it's just integration. Whether that's integration with calling platforms to enable easy dial-in, integration with meeting applications or team applications, so that when we hop off the meeting, our transcript, any documents we shared, all of that lives in the team workspace, so that the meeting isn't just a point in time experience, but it's part of that workflow around a project, around a team activity, and so on. I think those are areas where I expect to see, again, a lot of differentiation or efforts to differentiate going forward.
That's very interesting. So yeah, aside from that, document integration and other similar workflows, where do you see conferencing and video being added to spaces that didn't traditionally have it? Earlier, before, you mentioned there's a lot of integration work going around, a lot of unified communication going around, and contextual communications being done. So what are the most interesting examples you've seen?
Yeah, certainly telemedicine and telehealth has absolutely exploded in the last year. And I think that's one where we could be on the cusp of a expectation that you'll meet with your doctor virtually versus going in and seeing them in person. That may happen sometime. As you talked about generational differences, it could be that the Gen Alpha folks that were born after, I think it was 2015, they may grow up with a very different expectation of what it means to see a doctor than what our generation.
You're going to the doctor in person?
Yeah, exactly. So I think layering video into those kind of applications is really important. We've seen a lot of interest in using IoT type enabled video, so that if I'm responsible for say security monitoring, if an alarm goes off, I can activate a camera and see what's going on, and then share that with my coworkers. And then I think just kind of quick off the cuff video accessible through any application is really I think an end goal. So if I'm I'm an application manager, and I'm looking at a development platform that's showing me bug reports or security issues with a software test that I ran before I rolled out a build, can I click on a button within that platform to launch the video call with my teammates and share my screen or share the report with them and debug and figure out what that issue is, versus, okay, now I have to flip over to Zoom and click on a link or go to my calendar and schedule. Again, the desire, I think, from enterprise organizations or any organization is to have the collaboration tools available in whatever app you're living in. So if I'm a salesperson, I spend all day long in a CRM, I should be able to launch a call. I should be able to, to set up a quick meeting, all without leaving the application I'm in. And it's been a challenge for enterprises. We've been asking about things like CPaaS and use of APIs to build those workflows. And we find that, it's still a fairly low area of knowledge for enterprise communication buyers. They're often not really aware yet of what's available to them. They lack development resources. So making those applications easier to integrate through use of low code, no code, I think is going to be critical as well.
No, that's very interesting. Yeah, I have to say we've been working on some of that at SignalWire too, with the video collaboration, and the goal of the SDK design team, which I'm part of, has always been have some no code solutions too. So drop this into your page and you got a video room. Then of course you can configure anything you want, but that's really sounds like a good. That's been a very successful approach. I will add that one thing we've been working with, maybe you've heard of that, is video into joined with e-commerce websites. So you're on a page, you're seeing something you like, you're not sure if you want to buy it because it's expensive. We're talking luxury segments, and we've had inquiries about building out that kind of stuff. So that's going to be interesting too. Like, I like these shoes; they're $500. My feet are wide. Will they fit? Let me give a call to this person who, instead of being in the store, is waiting for a call. That will be a very interesting use case to see happen for sure.
Yeah, so adding in things like augmented reality so that I could possibly see what those shoes look like on my feet. We're also seeing a lot of interest in video customer facing for show me what you're seeing. So a couple of weeks ago, I had my home internet access upgraded and ran into an issue with the battery backup failing almost instantly. And so
wow.
the first thing when I called into my local provider was they sent me a link via text to my mobile app that activated my camera, and then I could show them my configuration. So the
That's
agent
smart.
could see what I was seeing. Yeah. So again, another innovative use of video that doesn't, that's not tied specifically to a video meeting platform, but it's video integrated through through APIs into whatever application I'm using.
That's extremely interesting. So I do have one sort of personal interest question to ask. You come from IT and you went to being an analyst and you went into business analysis, etc. I'm curious how that switch happened. Not because I want to, but because at some point I was involved with some people who did the same moves, and I'm just curious. So does it come from a interest that's more about how things are come to be than how things are built? How did you get into analysis from being in IT, and what did you do in IT? I'm just curious.
Yeah, my last IT position was running a global wide area network for a television network here in the U.S. called the Discovery Channel. And getting called at Sunday morning at 2 a.m. when the router failed in London, was not exactly a lot of fun. So there was an old IT magazine that focused on networking technologies called Business Communication Review, and I had avidly read that, and I dropped a line to one of the writers who I read religiously and asked about what he had just started an analyst company and didn't really know what analysts did at the time. So went and met with him and ended up joining his company. And initially I was writing guides to how enterprises could take advantage of things like IP multicast and how to do IP address design schemes and how to implement BGP and things like that. So it was very much researching and reporting on emerging technologies and how companies could use them. And now when I joined Nemertes, we were much more of an end user primary research organization. So now we kind of sit in the middle of companies that have really smart analysts who can tell you everything about technology and those that do market research. And we try and kind of blend both of those worlds.
That is very interesting. Yeah, I feel like I really like your approach very much, because I feel like some of the research you can find out there is of the first type that you described. So how to design your perfect network. It's very important, but ultimately companies these days need actionable research. Numbers that will tell them, I wouldn't say what to do, because blindly following numbers is not a good idea, but informing decisions is very important. And I think the industry in general, and you touched on this before when you talk about metrics and how to measure the behavior of your customers and your workforce, we should, as an industry, move to a more quantitative approach. People are still winging it a little bit too much.
I agree. And everything we publish, we try and do success correlations. So we identify in the space of collaboration, for example, the companies that have achieved demonstrable return on investment through saving money, through increasing sales, or they've achieved productivity gains. And we try and distill what are they doing differently. So in the study we just published yesterday, there's an awful lot of success correlations in there about what are successful organizations doing differently than those that are less successful, shall we say.
So without spoiling the study so people can go and read it if they want, what will be one key factor out of the many you identified?
I think going back to what we talked about earlier, it's a proactive approach to supporting work from home, giving people the flexibility to determine where they want to work, making sure that IT is thinking about the home as the new office and is supporting that environment, making sure that you're provisioning the right applications and the right hardware. So investing in higher quality cameras and audio devices. I think all of those are critical. And as we mentioned earlier, the different way of engaging with remote workers and leveraging video, using video for things like social activities, team building activities, and trying to engage with remote workers so that you have a better sense of how involved they feel in the organization. I think those are some of the critical takeaways. Some other areas we looked at were related to security and found that unfortunately a lot of companies are still struggling with security of the various applications that they brought in, the various ways now that they have of communicating with customers and with employees. So having a proactive security approach is another big area that we think that correlates strongly with success.
Yeah, security used to be an antivirus, a spam filter, and a firewall, and it's no longer like that by
Yeah.
far.
Wanna get
It's it's totally different because people are using their own devices, and it's very, very complicated. So, well, I thank you very much. It was a very, very interesting chat, and we had so many interesting insights here that I think I'll think about a few things, and maybe we can revisit in a few months to see what where the industry has gone. And well, again, thank you, Irwin, for being with us. Irwin Lazar, president and principal analyst at Mettergy, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mettergy. Sorry. Thank
Thanks
you
for
so
having me.
much. Thank you so much. Yes.